My relationship with my mother has always been really good. We've always been really good friends from the time I was little. I remember just loving to be around my mother and wanting to be her helper. And she depended a lot on me, I think, because I was the oldest daughter, and I guess I was pretty responsible. She says I was, and so she would have me help a lot. And so I what I remember of my mother the most, especially as a little girl, is just that she worked so hard. Seems like she had so much with she had 10 of us, of course not all at once. I mean, there were 7 up until my brother Craig was born, and they had 3 more later on, and some of those after actually Kirk and I left. But so there was always a lot of children and a lot of work. I remember an old washing machine out on our back porch. It wasn't even in the house at the time. It was out on our back porch, and I was a little tiny. And I remember that old washing machine out there, and Mama doing the washing. And anyway, she worked hard. She worked really hard. I had some kind of neat experiences with her growing up. I learned how to sew. She was a big influence in me and helped me learn how to sew. And so when I got to be in high school, I would help her, and we would sometimes stay up like into the middle of the night on the night before Christmas, or like Christmas Eve or the night before Easter. We're finishing up the dresses for all the girls for Christmas or for Easter and sewing together. And I always felt really special, like that that she depended on me, and that I was a helper to her. So anyway, but then as I got older, it got a little bit of irritating, because then as I've gotten to be an adult, whenever I'm with all my sisters, they all get upset with me, because whatever I say, Mom will go with, and all the other girls will say, yeah, it doesn't matter what we all say, whatever Ellen says, it's going to happen. And so for that reason, I kind of would like her to be a little more open to some of my sisters. So I try to do that way. But she's a lot of fun to tease too. I get a kick out of teasing her. She's so gullible that I can always tease her, and she doesn't catch on to things pretty fast. And whenever I do tease her, she always says, "Oh wait, you Wayne Davis." So I guess I'm like my dad a little bit that way. So anyway, but yeah, my mom and I have a really good relationship. She's actually probably one of my best friends. Anyway, I love her. Okay, talk a little bit of a relationship that I have had with my father, my dad. And I always called him Dad. I didn't ever call him Daddy or Father or Pops or what we do. So he was always my dad. And anyway, I think my youngest memories of my dad kind of go back to when I was sick with hepatitis. I was in the hospital for about 5 days, and I just remember him there with me, and how much I felt so comforted, having him there. I felt safe when he was there. And he spent a lot of time reading to me and teaching me at that time. But I loved being with my dad. We would, as a child, I remember spending hours hiking up in the mountains there up in the White Mountains, and also along the little Colorado River and Petrified Forest. We'd go, and he would take his camera, and we'd follow him around, and he'd take a bunch of us kids always. There'd always be a whole crew of us going with him, and pack a picnic lunch, and we'd all go up, and while he would take pictures and play around up in the mountains and stuff. But he was always around. I remember every night when he'd get home from work, just him being there with us and playing with us, and he was always there. He wasn't real like, he wasn't into sports and things like that type of things, but he was, he's always doing things with us kids, building things or helping us with things, and we just always had fun. I remember one experience. I was a little girl. I don't remember how old, but I was probably 10 or 11 maybe. But I woke up in the middle of the night, and I don't even remember why I woke up, but I got up and I went in. I had gone in, I guess, to use the bathroom or something. Anyway, as I came out into the hall, there was my dad right there, and he took me in his arms. It still makes me cry. took me in his arms and he held me and he just told me how much he loved me. And I just, you know, I don't know why he did. At that point, I didn't know why he had done that or anything, but he put me back into bed, and I got back into bed and went to sleep. And anyway, I think it was probably a year or two later, my mother told me that he had had a nightmare that night and something had happened to me. And he got up to check me, and when he found me awake, he just, anyway, it was interesting. He had had just a nightmare, I guess, about something. I don't even know what it was, but anyway, so it was just, that was a very tender moment for me with my dad. So anyway. Okay, when I was a little girl, I don't remember how old I was when the first time I saw it, but Cinderella came to the theater there in St. John's, and it was a Disney movie that Mom and Dad took us to, and I sat through that movie and I could not take my eyes off that movie. I loved Cinderella. I loved her, the story, and I just thought she was beautiful and the way she sang. And so she kind of became my favorite character, Disney character. I loved her. And I saw other Disney movies. I'd seen Snow White and the other ones, but Cinderella just for some reason that touched my heart. So I loved that movie. And since then, there's been several different releases of different Cinderella stories, and those are just so much fun, and I love the new Disney one too. But I've collected Cinderella dolls, so I probably still have about 5 or 6 of them. I've given my little granddaughter Hannah one of them, the really cute little Cinderella doll. But anyway, I've just loved Cinderella. She's just kind of my princess. Okay, so an experience that was kind of embarrassing to me that happened when I was a little girl. We had some neighbors. Actually, it was Rich's uncle and aunt lived down the street from us, and anyway, I was down playing with their little girl down there, and they had, I think, if I remember right, I found some money. That's what it was. I found there in the, I think one of the little girl's bedrooms, there was some money. I think it was like a quarter. And anyway, I put it in my pocket and went home, and I felt kind of bad about it, but not bad enough that I didn't go down to the 5 and 10 cent store. And they had these 2 little tiny baby dolls. They were little glass baby dolls. I could get both of them for a quarter. That shows you what things cost at that time. Anyway, they're the cutest little dolls. So I bought these 2 little baby dolls, and I brought them home, and anyway, I was playing with them, and my mom came in and she asked me where I got them. And I said, I bought them at the 5 and dime. And she says, well, where did you get the money for it? And I told her that I found it that I found it on the ground. And she kind of looked at me, and I guess I must have looked guilty, because she says, is that true? Is that where you found them? And I finally broke down and told her that I'd taken it from our neighbor's house. So I had to take these little dolls down to their house, and Mom gave me a quarter that I had to earn. She made me earn the quarter, but I took the quarter down, and I had to give them the dolls too. I had to give them the dolls and the quarter back. And anyway, I learned my lesson. I was never going to do that again. I was never going to steal, because I felt really badly. Anyway, that was my experience with thievery. I don't think I've done it since then. Talk a little bit about sports and athletics. I always was really athletic. I was fast. I could run really fast. Even as a little tiny girl, I remember, I have to tell you one story first. My brother Kirk had a BB gun. We were probably about 8 or 9 years old, I think, maybe 10. I don't know. We were still pretty little kids, but he had this BB gun that they'd gotten him, and he and his friend were playing out, and they wouldn't let me come play with him, and so I grabbed his BB gun and I shot at him, hit him in the leg. I was quite a ways away, so I don't think it hurt him that bad, but he came chasing me, and he chased me, and he could not catch me. I ran so fast. So I love to run, but I was pretty speedy. So they would have in my grade school, starting in about 4th grade, they would have field and track days at school, and they would have races, and they would have where you do broad jump, and you do a thing they called hop, skip, and jump, where you do like a three-step skip, and and then relays and just different kind of races, different lengths of races. Anyway, I always did really well in the really short distance. I was a sprinter. I could sprint really fast, and so I would always get first place in those. And then through what they would do is they would rank you by your size, and so your height and your weight would put you in the category that you were with the people that you would be competing against. So I was always competing against older kids because I was always really tall, and I was tall for my age. I was pretty skinny, but I was tall, and so that I would always end up with the girls that were either a year and sometimes even 2 years older than me. And I remember in 6th grade when we had our track and field, at 6th grade I was beating some of the 8th graders in the races and in the hop, skip, and jump, and I would come in first or second usually almost every time, and we'd get to go to the track meets that we'd do against some of the other schools because I was pretty fast. But so I loved that. And then basketball, I really liked basketball. We didn't start playing basketball until 7th grade is when they first started girls basketball with us, and I'd played a little bit with my brothers, but not too much. But I seemed to be kind of have a knack at it, and I really liked it. And I was so tall that I was probably the tallest girl in the junior high, both 7th and 8th grade. I was as taller than most of the 8th grade girls too. And so when I was in 7th grade, our basketball coach was Mr. Rabin, and I loved Mr. Rabin. He was probably my favorite teacher of all time. But he was our basketball coach, and he asked me to be part of the 8th grade girls team when they'd go travel, because the 7th grade girls didn't get to play that often, but 8th grade girls got to go to all the traveling things. So I went with the team, and I started with the 8th grade girls team when I was in 7th grade. So I loved the basketball. It was a lot of fun. And then our 8th grade year, our team, we had a good little team. We had some pretty good athletes in my class, and so we had a good little girls basketball team too. So I stunk at baseball. I could not hit a ball, and I could not throw a ball. I could catch one, but I was not good at that. So that was not so much fun. I didn't care for that one, but I liked volleyball. But the unfortunate thing about girls' sports when I was young, it ended at 8th grade. They had no sports for girls in high school. So the only thing you could get involved in in high school would be cheer or pom. And so I got involved. I liked being a cheerleader, and so I was a cheerleader all 4 years of high school, and that was kind of fun. And we'd go to cheer camps, and we'd do our routines and things like that, which was kind of the only way to be active as a teenager. I think if they had girls sports, I probably never would have been a cheerleader. I would have been I would have gone out for the sports. I loved the sports. That would have been more my thing, but it was fun. I enjoyed being a cheerleader too. So, and then of course one of my favorite things to do in high school is, as a cheerleader, the cheerleaders will always get to walk the boys off the field, of the football field, and so you would run out there and we'd get to walk the boys off the field. So that was always kind of fun. I was kind of a flirt, I think. I liked the boys. But anyway, that's kind of my experience with sports. I'm a doll person. I've always loved dolls. From the time I was just a little girl, I've loved little dolls. My first remembrance of a doll is when I was 5. My mom and dad, actually, I had been really sick. I had gotten hepatitis that year, and it was in the fall, and it was before Christmas. And I think my mom and dad kind of, it had been a scary thing for them, for me, because I had been so sick and had been in the hospital, and it had gone on for about 2 months, and so it was kind of a scary thing for my mom and dad. Anyway, for this Christmas, when I was better, and I was pretty much well by then, but they bought me a doll that was a baby doll, and it was full size. Full size. It was the size of a baby. It was like this big, and it was just, and I think they spent quite a bit of money on it for that time. At that time, it was probably kind of an expensive doll, but oh, it was. I loved that baby doll, and that was my doll for all growing up. I played with that doll, and I loved that doll. And my mom would make clothes for it, and I would make little beds, and I loved that doll. I kind of got into Barbies a little bit when I was a little bit older, but I never was truly into the Barbie dolls as much. I liked the baby dolls, but when I got to be older, I just loved dolls. And when Rich and I started dating, his mother loved dolls too. And that's one thing we had in common. His mother loved dolls, and she had all these dolls, and she had baby dolls and different kind of dolls, and she showed me all of her dolls, and I loved her dolls too. So when Rich and I had been dating for 1 year, it was kind of like our 1 year anniversary. That night when he took me out after we'd gone out to, I can't remember what, I think we'd gone to a dance or something, and after the dance he pulled this box out of the car. It was a big box about this big, out of the car, and handed it to me, and I opened it up, and there was this beautiful, like, antebellum looking girl doll with this beautiful red velvet dress and an umbrella and a big hat. Oh, she was so pretty. Oh my gosh, I was just in heaven. I couldn't believe it. I went in after I got home, and it was late. It was because it was after a dance, probably about midnight, and I woke my mom and dad up to show them this doll that Rich had gotten me. So anyway, I loved that doll too. So then when Dad did his residency, we went to New Orleans, and down in the French Quarter, they had this shop that had these porcelain dolls that were just they were beautiful, these beautiful porcelain dolls, and I loved them, but they were so expensive. I mean, they were not, cheap. So I knew I wasn't going to get a doll, but every time we'd go down there, I'd love to go look at them. And so the first Christmas that we were there, Rich's mom was going to come out and spend Christmas with us, and so I went shopping, and I looked. This doll shop they were too expensive, but I found it another place. I found a little porcelain doll. It was about this big, it was a cute little doll, but it wasn't a very big one, but it was kind of a pretty little porcelain doll that I found. And Rich's mom came for Christmas, and so I wrapped it up for her because I knew she loved dolls too. And Christmas morning, I was so excited because I couldn't wait to give her this doll, because I knew she loved them too. Anyway, she opened the doll and she pulled it out and looked at it, and she started to cry, and that just made me cry too, because she loved it so much. We just had that thing in common. Well, one of the things that New Orleans had at that time is I found this class where you could actually learn how to make porcelain dolls, and so I signed up for this class. And you would go in, and you would buy the greenware from them, which was the porcelain that hadn't been fired yet, and you'd sand it down and get it ready, and then they would fire it for you. And then in the class, they would teach you how to paint the eyes and the lashes and all the different things, and tint the faces and stuff. And so I started making these dolls, and most of the dolls that they had were kind of old-fashioned looking dolls, and so they had patterns that you could buy that would make for the clothes for these dolls. And so as I was making the dolls, I would go get fabric, and I would make a beautiful little dress. So on the day that my doll was finished and we put it together with the ropes and stuff, I'd bring my dress, and I'd dress these dolls up with these dresses that I'd made, these beautiful dresses. And anyway, they were so pretty, and I ended up making, I think, 6 or 7 dolls total. I made several different sizes and shapes, and baby doll and different kinds of dolls. So anyway, when we were leaving New Orleans, I packed all these dolls up in kind of big boxes and wrapped them all up really carefully, and we loaded our moving van, and we were leaving New Orleans to come back to Phoenix. And so I had packed all these dolls up, and it was right before Christmas, and we pulled into Phoenix, and had pulled the truck in there. We were going to go load it into a storage unit, because we had 6 months left that Dad had some rotations he had to do in Texas and California. So we were just bringing all our stuff to Arizona to put in storage until we were finished. But so I pulled out this box out of the truck and brought it in. We were at Rich's sister Robin's house, and I had taken all their clothes off and had just wrapped them very carefully and put them in this great big box. And so I started pulling these dolls out one at a time and dressing them and putting them up on the counter. And Rich's mom was there just watching me bring out these dolls, and she was like, each one was prettier than the next, and it was so much fun. So anyway, but I had made one of them. In fact, the largest one I had made for her. So she ended up with that, and I'd made one for my mother, and I gave my sisters one. So I pretty much gave them away. I gave Robin one of each of these dolls. But anyway, that was so much fun making those dolls, and they were so beautiful. But that was fun. So when we got back and Rich started his started working as an anesthesiologist, I actually bought a kiln, but I never got it working, so I never did make dolls again, which I kind of feel bad I never did. But that was kind of an experience that I had. But one of the things that I always did when we'd go on vacations, whether it was Disney World or I'd go to California or Hawaii or whatever, what I'd bring home from each of my trips was always a doll. I would bring, so I have a collection of dolls, and I've gotten it down a little bit because I've given a few away to some of my nieces and to my sisters and a couple to my granddaughters. But I probably still have about 50 dolls, and I have porcelain dolls, and I have rubber dolls, and I have wooden dolls, and I have rag dolls. I have all kinds of just different kind of dolls, and each one of them are kind of special to me. And I know dolls are kind of not in season now. People kind of think they're kind of strange, but I still love my dolls. I probably always will. I think there was a time in my life when I was bullied that was kind of interesting. I was actually a little bit older. I was in college, and I was in the dental hygiene program at Northern Arizona University, and I was in the very first class there. They started a brand new program when I was a freshman in high school or in college, and the first class started when I was a sophomore. And so I got into that dental hygiene class, and there were some instructors in the class that started with us too, and we would have clinicals starting. Well, we started our first year, but it was a 2-year program. So the first year we started just doing clinicals on just mannequins, and then started taking patients. And then our second year we actually took patients all the time. Well, I had this one clinical instructor that when I was in my freshman year, she was kind of a bully with the girls, and she would kind of she would attack a girl a little bit. She would complain about what they would do, and she'd find things wrong with everything they did, and until she'd break them down and they'd cry, and she would and then she'd leave them alone. Once she broke them down, she'd leave them alone. Well, so she came after me my second years when she kind of started with me, and every time she would come and check my work, she found something wrong with something. She would either say that I hadn't cleaned the place on the teeth right, or that, I mean, she would always mark me down for things. She'd mark me down because she said my hair was not fixed, it was unruly looking, or she would mark me down for just crazy things. And she kept at it, and I was not the type that would break down. I was very strong, and so I wouldn't let her get to me, and I kept at it, and she kept, I mean, to the point that she was making my grade. I was getting down to where I was almost going to fail in my class because of the grades she was giving me. And it was really hard, and I just dreaded going to my clinicals because of the way she would make me feel there. But and I guess if I had broken down, maybe she would have left me alone, but that just wasn't my nature to do. I would not allow someone to do that to me, and so I never did. But so it was the end of my senior year, and I thought she was going to fail me, and she decided, or what she told us, we were getting ready to take our nationals in March, and so we had to go take our national boards, and it was actually, they were actually given there on campus, but it was a whole day affair. You had exams in the morning for, I think it was about 3 hours in the morning, and then 3 hours in the afternoon that we took these exams. And she told the whole class, she said, if anybody can get, if you can score above 90, she says, you'll get an A in your class, And so I went and took this exam, and I had prepared for it, and I read the questions, and I went through the exam, and I did it, and I went over it, and I went over it, and I was one of the last ones to leave the exam because I just wanted to make sure I hadn't made any mistakes and that I got everything I could. And so when when we got our exams back, I didn't get a 90, I got an 89, which was one of the highest grades in the class. And when I went for my review with her, she says, well, obviously you know the material. And anyway, she ended up passing me, but she was quite a bully. One thing that we did, my parents, I had told my parents about it, and of course with them I would go home and cry, you know. But my dad came into my clinic actually one day with his camera, and we did a video in the clinic with all the girls and went through all the, you know, the different procedures that we did in the clinic, and he videotaped all of that, and he kind of thought maybe something like that would help, you know, with her. And I don't know that it did, but I still have the video, which is kind of neat, of all the girls in my class. So anyway, but that was the only time in my life that I've ever had anybody that treated me that way, or had that power kind of over me, and was able to make me feel that way. So anyway, that's my experience. Okay, how did I meet Dad, and what did I think of him when we first met him? You know, I probably met him for the first time kind of in kindergarten. We started school together. I don't remember him real well. I do kind of remember him in younger grades, but as we got up to like 4th, 5th, and 6th, I do remember him. He was kind of our class clown, and I thought he was really funny. We didn't have a whole lot to do with each other because we were in different wards, and so if you weren't in the same ward, you didn't go to primary together, or you didn't, we weren't in young men, or we called it mutual. So we didn't really have a whole lot to do with each other. But one of my memories of him was 7th grade. We were in Mr. Pulsifer's 7th grade class, and he was in my class. And he had this plaid, kind of like wool plaid coat that he wore to school every day, and he never took it off. He wore it, and he'd just keep it on during class, and he wore it every single day. I even think into the spring he still wore it. And towards the end of the year, some of the boys in the class, just teasing him, would hit him on his back and that thing and have a little dust fly off the coat. It was kind of funny, so I remember that about him. But he was always kind of a class clown. And then we were in 8th grade class together too. We were in the same class in 8th grade. I remember him in 8th grade just being he was a lot of fun. But still, he didn't really come to the dances that, you know, they would have mutual dances and things like that, and he really didn't do too much of that. He was I think he was a little more immature than some of the boys in the class, so that wasn't his thing. But and then I remember in high school, I remember him in the class. I don't remember having too much to do with him, you know, through our freshman or sophomore years. But our sophomore year, we were actually chosen. They would choose at the end of the year, they'd choose like class favorites, and Rich and I were chosen as our sophomore class favorites. And so they took a picture of us together, and I was sitting kind of on a post there out in front of the high school. In fact, they're still there, those rock things, and he was standing there next to me and looked very uncomfortable and kind of like he was very shy. But that was probably the first picture we ever had taken together, the two of us. Oh, one other thing I wanted to remember, I remember when I was in about 6th grade, I had a birthday party that I invited him to. He came to my birthday party, and he brought me a little perfume bottle, and I'm sure his mother picked it out. But it was one of those little squirt ones that had the little push thing, and it was real pretty glass and had this thing. And anyway, I remember that present that he brought me. It was that was my favorite thing I got that birthday party. So I can remember him then a little bit. But it wasn't until about our junior year that I kind of started noticing him. He actually probably grew several inches that year and started filling out, and anyway, he was kind of a good-looking guy, and so towards the end of our junior year, I approached his cousin, who was a cheerleader with me, and we were friends, and I said, you know, I wouldn't mind if Rich would ask me out to the senior hop, and so she told him. And so that's how we ended up getting our first date. We ended up going to the senior hop our junior year. That sounds kind of funny that you'd be going to senior hop your junior year, but in St. John's, the school was so small, everybody went to everything. So, you know, you go to the junior prom, you go to the senior, everybody goes. So anyway, we went. That was our very first date. So that's it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Pops proposed to me. So we had been dating since we were 17 years old. We started dating at the end of our junior year, and we knew we cared for each other. and we had kind of the same goals in life. We wanted to be successful. We wanted Rich to be able to do what he wanted to do, and I wanted to get a college education. And so we took off to college together and spent our freshman year at Northern Arizona University, where I was able to prepare for the dental hygiene program, and Dad was getting ready to go on a mission, and so he left on his mission, and I knew I was going to wait for him. And I actually had a calendar that I had marked off every day with a little X on each day as I went through, and then this is kind of silly, but I had a jar of M&Ms that I had an M&M for every day, and so I'd eat one every day. Well, my little sister got into those at one time, so that kind of blew that one. But I did wait for him, and right before he came home off his mission, his mother and sister and brother-in-law were planning a trip to New York to pick him up off his mission, and they invited me to go with them. And so I went off to New York with his mom and his family to pick him up at the mission home, and we had about a month actually that we traveled around through New York. We went to New York State and up into Palmyra and actually into Niagara Falls, and then down and did a trip of the eastern states, which was kind of a fun trip together. But Rich hadn't really been released from his mission yet, so there was no hand holding or anything like that. So it was kind of a nice time for us to just kind of get reacquainted and and not have any pressure or anything again. And anyway, but he got home, got released, and within about a week we were off to college at NAU again for my senior year. I had one more year to go to graduate, and Rich was starting his sophomore year. And anyway, I think it was always kind of known that we were going to get married, but he hadn't really proposed to me. And we were there at NAU, and about a month or two into the semester, his cousin got off his mission, and he had been there at NAU with his girlfriend. It was Catherine and Nick Patterson, and Nick came right after he got off his mission. He came to NAU to see Catherine, and that night they got engaged. And so I was kind of looking at Rich, and I go, what the heck? She didn't even wait for him. And I waited for you, and you haven't even asked me. And he says, okay. We were actually out in a field catching butterflies for his entomology class. So he said, let's go. And so we went into town, and we went and picked out a ring. And anyway, the ring I picked out was one that they had a special order. So it took about 6 weeks before it got in. And when he got the ring, he came, and actually in his dorm room, he proposed to me and gave me the ring. And my brother Gary was there at NAU and kind of was our little sidekick, and so he came down, and we all had some sparkling apple juice, and then we went to dinner and went to a movie, all three of us, for our engagement. So that was kind of the way we got engaged. Some of the things that I'm proud of in my life, I think growing up, my parents were very loving and good, but I think we kind of my brothers and sisters and I came with kind of quieter, calmer natures, I think, I would say. I don't know, but we were always very obedient children. And one of the things I was really proud of is when I was in 8th grade, there was an award that was that they gave every year. It was the Citizenship Award, and it was probably the most coveted award there, because they'd give it one to a boy and one to a girl, and it was voted on by all the teachers in the school from the time you're like 1st grade clear through 8th grade. So all the teachers got to vote on who would get this award in 8th grade at the 8th grade graduation. And so anyway, so when I was in my 8th grade year, I was chosen, and I got the Citizenship Award. That made me very proud, because I thought, it showed that the teachers could like me, and that I had been, that they thought that I was a good person. But what was even more unique about that, getting that award, my brother Kirk was in my class too, and he got the Boys Citizenship Award. And anyway, when we got them, my grandfather, he said, well, they couldn't have given it to one without giving it to the other. And his sister, my grandfather's sister, was actually one of the teachers, And she told him, she says, no, she says, Mark, she says, in fact, when everybody voted and when it came out that way, they almost wouldn't do it because they were brother and sister. They didn't want to do, give the same to the same family, but everybody protested and said, nope, those were the two best kids in the class. So my brother Kirk and I both got the citizenship awards when we were in 8th grade. And then when I was a senior, they gave us citizenship again, and I got it that time too. So I guess I must have been a good citizen, and everybody liked that. The other thing I was kind of proud of in high school is I learned how to sew. And by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was making all my own clothes. So I would make my dresses and my pants, and I would make my cheerleading uniforms, and I made my prom dresses, and then I would sew for my little sisters too. I did a lot of sewing, but I was very proud of that, and I was a pretty good little seamstress actually for how old I was. I did really well doing that. And then when I got into college, I took an advanced sewing and tailoring class that really gave me some skills that have helped me my whole life. And so I've been able to sew, and I'm very proud of what I can do in my sewing. That's probably one of the skills that I have that I'm really proud of. So that, and then another thing that I've kind of enjoyed doing that I've taken on in the last I guess 10 years maybe, is I've started making cakes, and I've proved to be pretty good at it. I make pretty good cakes. I not only do they taste good, I kind of got a reputation, especially at the county. Whenever I bring in my cupcakes or my cakes, they all, oh yeah, Ellen's bringing in the cake. They're always excited, and then when somebody else brings it in, they said, oh, we hate to bring them in because Ellen's gonna eat one of these cakes that is nothing like what she does. But so that kind of always makes me feel good that I can do that. But I've enjoyed decorating cakes too, and I think I'm pretty good at that. So I'm proud of those kind of things. I'm proud of the fact that I went to college and got a degree and was able to, kind of do some of the things that I've wanted to do in my life. So those are some of the things that I'm proud of that I've accomplished. I think probably the most important thing that I've accomplished, though, I think is my family. I love my family. I think I've got the best kids ever and the best grandkids. So anyway, that's my crowning glory. I want to talk a little bit about some of the experiences I've had in my life that have affected my testimony and helped me become kind of the person I am, spiritual experiences. One of the first ones that comes to mind, I remember I loved primary, and I loved being a mutual, and I loved going to those different things. And I got involved early, actually, in callings. When I was a freshman in high school, I was given the responsibility of the junior primary music director. And so primary was after school on, I think, Wednesdays or something. But so I would go after school, and I was in the junior primary, so I had the little kids that were like the 3-year-olds through like the 7-year-olds in that junior primary, and I would teach them songs. And anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed doing that. And then also they called me to be the Sunday school, senior Sunday school chorister. And at that time, we would have Sunday school in the morning, and then our sacrament meeting would be in the evening. And so for Sunday school, we'd all meet in the chapel, and we actually had the sacrament during Sunday school too. So they would have the sacrament, and then they'd have some what they call 2.5-minute talks, which they gave the youth, and mostly the youth, a chance to give talks because they didn't have them speaking in church like they do, the youth speakers now. And anyway, and then we'd always have a practice song that we'd practice a hymn every Sunday too, and usually during the month we'd have one hymn that we'd learn. Anyway, they made me the chorister for that, and so I would lead the music for the opening song and the sacrament, and then I would do the practice hymn where we'd practice the song, and I'd teach the congregation the hymn, and then the closing before we left. So I had that calling too. So I felt like I had experiences very young that were where I had an opportunity to serve, and I felt like I always had a testimony of the gospel, and it was true. But when Rich went on his mission, I started my sophomore year in college, and I went back to school. We had been together with our freshman year, and we were inseparable. We were there together, doing everything. So when I went back my sophomore year, it was kind of hard because I was all alone. I didn't, the roommate that I had had the year before, we were supposed to room together again, but we ended up in separate dorms that they put us in, and so she ended up with a different roommate. So I ended up all kind of by myself, and so it was kind of a hard time where I felt really alone, and I was missing Dad, and I wanted, I wanted to do well in school, and I was a good student, but it was a hard time. And anyway, I would get letters from Dad every week, and I would write to him. I actually wrote to him every day, but I didn't mail it every day. I just kind of like a diary. I would write daily on this letter, and then at the end of the week I'd mail it to him, and I was pretty encouraging and everything. But his letters, when they started coming, I could tell the change in him. I could tell his testimony growing, and I could tell that he was growing spiritually. And I thought, this is not going to be so good. When he gets home, he's going to be so much further ahead of me, because I'll still be this kind of silly little airhead that hadn't really grown, and he was growing so much. And so I decided to set a goal to read read the scriptures. I was going to read. I wanted to read all of them. I had never done that before. In seminary, we read the scriptures, but I just had never on my own ever, just taken the scriptures and read through them. And so I started with the Book of Mormon, and I read that first, and then I read the Doctrine and Covenants and the Prolongate Price, and then I started on the Bible, and I read the Old Testament, which was more difficult, but I got through it, and then I got to the New Testament. And by the time I was reading the New Testament, I would at night, I could hardly wait to start reading, and sometimes I couldn't put it down. I would read up until midnight, and I'd have classes and stuff, but I just wanted so much to read. It filled me so full of the Spirit, and I just felt so strong. And I gained an amazing testimony of Scripture at that time. I was 19 years old, and I think that's the first time in my life where I actually had that really amazing burning feeling where you just know that what you're reading and what you're learning is true, and that it was Heavenly Father's word, and it just spoke to me. And I've read the scriptures before, and I feel a strong feeling, but I've never had anything quite as powerful as that first experience that I had with those scriptures then. So that was one of my first really amazing spiritual experiences. Since then, there's been lots of just amazing experiences. I think when Dad and I got married, and we started our lives together, I felt very close to the Spirit and very close to Heavenly Father, and wanted our lives to be one of, where we had a family that was close. And I got pregnant right away after we got married, and had our first little guy, little Michael. And I remember when he was born, that amazing feeling like you were close to heaven, that Heavenly Father was right there with me. I felt when I put that little boy into my arms, I thought, this is what Heavenly Father's plan is. I knew His plan, that we were supposed to have families, and that was probably one of the times that I felt that how close to Heavenly Father and His Spirit. So, and then through the years with each of the children as they've come into my life, I've had that same spiritual experience with every single one of them. With my little adopted daughters, I've had that same very strong spiritual feeling when they came into my life, and also my twins. So I think having children has been one of the most spiritual experiences in my life too. And I'm sure I've had lots of others that have been amazing with different callings I've had and different things that have happened in my life. But and through some of the trials I've had too, I've had very spiritual experiences. But I've been truly blessed to have a testimony of the gospel, and have a knowledge of my Savior, and that my Father in heaven loves me. And this has been probably one of the most important things of my life is to have this knowledge, and to know that I will be with my family again and will live again with my Savior. And anyway, these are what are important to me.